I like to compare you to the Victoria Falls. You're a wonder of the world.
Very, very kind of you. But no, there is who enjoys life and who loves, who's blessed enough to be doing what I'm doing.
Fantastic. And for those of you who've just tuned in, Dean Duplessis is a cricket commentator who is, I think the right word is visually impaired, but absolutely amazing. And we're going to dig right into that. And Dean, I want to start right at the beginning. Born in Kadoma, I'm told, and needless to say, a real fighter, because I'm told that when you were born, you were told that you only had 3 months to live.
Yeah, certainly. Well, yeah, my parents were told that that I had 3 to maximum 5 months to live, because I was born as tumors behind both my retinas. So what happened was, when I was 3 months old, we had the right eye removed. That's slow the process in terms of the tumors developing and spreading and so on. So the right eye was removed, and I managed to bat my way through that very tricky little stage where the ball was swinging around all over the place. But I managed to negate the seam and the swing, and I got my way through that. Although my left eye, I kept my natural left eye. Up until the age of 23, going on 24, I was never able to see out of it. So yeah, born blind with 3 months to live, and on Saturday I will be 44, not out.
Wow, fantastic. 44 not out. Happy birthday in advance, Dean, though I'm sure that I will pop you a note before that. And I'm sure there's a bride planned, because I know that's one of your favorite things to
this time around. There's no bride. Normally there's a bride. To be honest, as you know, I'm probably the biggest lover of brides on the planet. As long as there's meat and fire, I'm happy. But we're actually doing something different. We're going to be having a pizza party on Saturday, a small little get together with lots of pizza. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to be doing.
And as you said, born in Kadoma, Dean, what are your fondest childhood memories?
Well, to be honest, I was actually born in Harare, and then at the age of 3 years old, my mother and father moved back to Kadoma. So mom and dad and my grandparents were all born in Kadoma, but I was born, and my brother Gary, we were born in Harare, but then we had a bereavement in our family. So we then moved back to mom and dad's hometown, where that was where I grew up. So to me, that's home. I don't remember anything of my childhood leading up to, my earliest childhood memories, I think, would be of Kadoma, that's for sure. So yeah, I mean, I have many fond memories, from just the interaction, obviously growing up in a small town, interacting with a lot of the people, being privileged enough to be outdoors more often than indoors. I was a real outdoor child and loved feeling the sun on my back, and swimming, and if I wasn't swimming, we would always be doing something. Very, very full life. But back in the early 1980s, things were very different then to what they are now. So I basically attended boarding school in Harare to prepare me, that I had to then started boarding school at the age of 6 years old, in nice memories. But having said that, it had to be done. There was no other way around it. So there were some very happy memories, like any child, really, very happy memories, and then some not so such happy memories.
And you ended up in school in Worcester. Now, how did that come about?
Well, back in so I started attending the Pioneer School in Worcester at the age of 6, which would have been in 1983. I think pretty much as far my mom and dad knew that that would be the case pretty much from when I was born. You know, they started doing their research, and though you know, St. Giles School here in Harare was to deal with children of all sorts of disabilities. They were only able to deal with, to call the term politically correct, visually impaired. Visually impaired could mean anything, and I refer to it as blind. They were only equipped to deal with blind kids up to a certain age. Now, like any loving and caring parent, you know, mom and dad wanted the very best for me as a student. I can assure you that it broke their hearts very thoroughly to be sending me away to a foreign land where initially my ears were assailed by what at the time sounded like an appalling language, very guttural and very harsh and unforgiving. That's what it sounded like when I first was introduced to Afrikaans. My folks were in touch with the school. You know, lots of letters were being written to and fro from when I was a tiny toddler. And then, you know, obviously the decision was made that I would join the Pioneer School at the age of 6 years old, which was a real baptism of fire, let me tell you.
Well, when you say baptism of fire, I want to dive into that, Dean, but I've got so many questions lined up for you here tonight, and I want to jump right into them, and a lot of them are more to do with the cricket. But before I get there, so just to show how much you love the game, I'm told you sacrificed buying some toiletries and some of your groceries just to get on the phone with Davy Houghton.
Yeah, yes, indeed. So it was 1992 when that started happening. You know, Zimbabwe had just been granted full test status, and they were playing. They had a one-off test match and 2 one-day internationals against India, which was then followed by 2 one-day internationals and 2 test matches against New Zealand. So, I mean, obviously, back in those years, as you know, there was no internet or satellite television or anything of that nature. So, although I could listen to sports roundups on the BBC, it wasn't good enough for me. So, the pocket money that my mom and dad gave me, as opposed to spending it on things that they would have wanted, like deodorants and toothpaste and so on, and all the little luxuries, like a little bit of tuck, I basically changed it, converted it all into coins, so that I could call either ZBC, and they would give me the updates. You know, ZBC, what was known as Radio 1 back in those days, and they would give me the updates, and it was amazing because as soon as I heard any presenter who answered the phone, as soon as I heard the coins falling into the call box, they would say, "Is that the young man from Cape Town? The score is 77 for 2 Zimbabwe." But they didn't really know a great deal about cricket, so they would just quickly give me a score. And anyway, even if I wanted to know who was at the crease, I didn't have enough money for that, so I could get from there. But yeah, you're right. They 1990 were touring South Africa. One of those, when it's a little decent proper tours, Godwin. So they would have a whole games, and then the internationals. So I beg your pardon, 4 one-day internationals. Then they broke for the 3 test match series, and then went back to the one-day stuff. So it was a beautiful long tour, which is exactly what I liked. And at the same time, Zimbabwe were gearing up to start their domestic season, and they were hosting Sri Lanka in October of 1994. So I managed to get Davy Houghton's number and started talking to him. And my money was about to run out. He heard the beeping tone and knew what was happening. And he said, "I got a pen and paper, quick as you like. Give me your number and I'll call you back." And he did, which was just remarkable, you know. And he spoke to me for a good 10 to 15 minutes. No, which is amazing. I mean, I'm not so sure I would have entertained a 17-year-old wanting to chatter at me all the time when you got your family around you and things like that. But Davy was just so patient and so kind and so genuine. You know, we spoke about about the 142 that he scored against New Zealand in the 1987 World Cup. We spoke about a double hundred that he scored for Zimbabwe against England A, and you know, just memories like that that I absolutely treasure for the rest of my life. And I was able to tell him that the late Hansie Cronje scored 257 for what was then known as Free State in the 4-day warm-up game against Australia, and he hit Tim May for 3 consecutive sixes. So we swapped stories, you know. So I'm pretty sure that the Flower Brothers and Davy Houghton and Edo Brandes, they were my victims, who I used to phone quite regularly. I'm pretty sure they got very tired and frustrated of me phoning them, but they never showed it if they did.
A real lover of the game is Dean. And Dean, we want to go into your commentary, your commentary that blows us all away. And before we get to that, you've probably met lots and lots of different and amazing cricket players along the line and umpires along the line. And one story that comes to mind is one where I'm told that you gifted Daryl Hare with your eye in his hand.
Yes, indeed. That was during the England Zimbabwe at the hotel down in Bulawayo, and myself and Daryl Hare got chatting, and Daryl had, I'm afraid, wasn't really the greatest of umpires, to be honest with you. He got many decisions very wrong, and Zimbabwe were quite often on the receiving end of Daryl Hare's poor umpiring. So there was a time when Murray Goodwin was given out to a ball that pitched outside leg stump. Poor old Heath Streak also got a couple of dodgy decisions, both when Zimbabwe were batting and when we were bowling. And I was just a bit frustrated, you know, because Zimbabwe are trying their hardest to make their way in the world of cricket. And, you know, they had enough naysayers as it was. I mean, umpires are human, for goodness sake. They're going to make mistakes. But this was just blatant poor umpiring by Daryl Hare. And it wasn't just against Zimbabwe. It was pretty much against everybody other than Australia. Because if you remember, or you may not remember, you may have been a bit young, but, you know, back in those years, you had one neutral umpire and one home umpire. So it was very dodgy with those home umpires. Anyway, so we were having a beer and a chat. And I said to Daryl, the next time you go into the field, I have something that I'd like to try and help you out with. So I took out my right eye and I handed it to him. And at first he glared at it, apparently with a very angry expression on his face. Then he started to smile, and then he started to laugh. Now, Daryl Hare has a very infectious and natural and genuine laugh. When you hear Daryl Hare laugh, you'll hear him pretty much throughout the hotel, such as his laughter. And he could not stop laughing. And he laughed and he laughed. And he eventually, I had to remind him to please kindly give my eye back to me, because he was holding on to it, but he was laughing so hard that he forgot to give my eye back to me. So that's a story about myself and Daryl Hare with my eye.
Well, I'm glad you didn't squash it, Dean. Now, Dean, you in cricket commentary, you in sport commentary, and like you said, you're visually impaired. How do you manage to do that? How do you manage to comment on a game that you can't necessarily see?
I think, to be very honest with you, my saving grace in terms of commentating are the stump microphones. If there were no stump mics, I don't know if I'd be able to be as accurate as I am now. And by the way, I'm not saying I'm completely accurate. I'm not like James Anderson or Glenn McGrath or Sean Pollock. You know, probably a bit like Heath Streak. Let's maybe put it in that mold, because so the stump microphones are very helpful, and they were not designed for blind people. They were designed to bring a little bit of something extra to listening to the game as well. So my first introduction to stump microphones were in the 1992, and still to this day, my favorite World Cup ever, the 92 World Cup, which was played in Australasia. You know, and so you'd hear the tap, and you hear the bowler get to the wicket, get to the crease and deliver. And all bowlers have their idiosyncrasies, you know. But then I started to realize that I can actually tell who the bowler is by listening to these microphones. Sean Pollock used to get these, being a leg spinner. Most leg spinners, obviously, as I'm sure you know, have to, you know, a finger spinner is more about accuracy and using your fingers. Well, of course, so does a leg spinner, but he also uses a lot of his upper body, and there's a lot of shoulder action and wrist action that goes into a leg spinner, which also means that you'll hear them approach the crease with their feet. And there's a big grunt. Warnie at times sounded a little constipated when he used to bowl, but I was able to pick it up, and then, but it still took me a while to realize this, you know. And I would say it was about by the mid 1990s that I realized that I can tell you when it's a slower ball, and that's simply because by the amount of time that it takes to when it leaves the bowler's hand to when it hits the batsman's pad or hits the stumps or when the batsman plays a shot. And then I started to realize I can tell you when a batsman plays a sweep shot, because lots of times you'll hear the bat actually hit the ground when a sweep is played, you know, and when the ball is hit through the offside, it's a bit more of a sharper crack sound as opposed to when it gets played through the onside. And yeah, so it was a lot of fiddling around with my hearing, and you know, then realizing, oh gosh, you know, am I right or am I wrong? So I'd have to test my theory with my brother Gary. You know, and we obviously had to do this over and over and over again, so that I knew that if that I was actually right, you know. And then obviously my opportunity came to prove myself in 2001. That was via the internet, doing radio commentary on the internet with a couple of very good friends who we'll talk about just now, very influential in my career. And then I got my first television gig in 2003 with Mike Hazeman, which was unbelievable. And I was very blessed, you know, because a lot of guys, when they start commentating on radio, it takes them a number of years before they are lucky enough to get a TV gig. And it only took me 2 years. So, you know, there's a lot to be grateful for, and a lot and you realize that, you know, wow, I'm blessed in so many areas.
Indeed, Dean. And you say that you can pick up who the bowler is, or just by hearing them run up. And who would you say was the easiest bowler for you to pick up using the stump mics?
If I heard bowlers for a couple of times, then I kind of, you know, knew who it was. So, you know, from a South African aspect, I would say the two easier ones were Alan Donald and Sean Pollock. Australia, Shane Warne, because like I said, he gave that very big grunt, that almost like a Monica Seles like grunt as he bowled. So that was from a Zimbabwean prospect. You know, we never really saw a lot of Zimbabwe cricket back in those days. But I suppose Ed O'Brandis, as big as what he is, when he approached the crease, he really used to come in like, you know, sort of twinkle toe, get to the crease. You hardly heard him when he got to the crease. He never gave a grunt, and you hardly heard his feet at the crease, which actually helped me because it was so quiet. You'd maybe just hear like as I just referred to as a twinkle toe, you know, despite the fact that he's 6'3" and I don't know, about 100 and something kilograms, a big, strong unit, you know. But, you know, and of course, Heath Streak occasionally gave a bit of a grunt as well when he bowled. So, to be honest with you, you know, and there's also certain batsmen when they at the crease. So when Marcus Trescothick and Andrew Strauss used to open the batting for England, you used to say, yeah, come on, just say run. And that's how I knew when those two at the crease. For example, Kevin Peterson and Graham Smith, whenever they decided to play the hook or the pull shot, they too would give a bit of a grunt. And so that's how I knew when KP or Graham Smith was at the crease. So it's just basically just really listening and utilizing the stump mics and paying attention, you know. So you don't want to be talking about going to the shops and getting something to eat or to drink when you're listening to a test match, you know, because you are fully focused on listening and what's happening out there, which I'm sure used to drive people around me pretty mad.
And you say this, and you could pick up so many cues, as you've said, but what are some of your challenges that you have in the ComBox to date?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. The biggest challenge that I have, Godwill, is that I've actually lost a fair amount of my hearing. And I have become a bit afraid of going back into the commentary box because, you know, normally I have a very good rapport with my co-commentator. So he wouldn't tell me what was going on, but he would say to me, all right, Dean, on your screen there's a graphic that says Tatenda Taibu and Hamilton Masakadza have now added 157 for the third wicket, breaking the previous best of 132 that was set by Dave Houghton and Andy Flower. And now the problem that I'm having now is I am not able to distinguish whether he's talking to me or whether he's actually talking to somebody else or actually commentating. So I tend to now shy away very much from television, to be honest with you, because I know my limitations. And, you know, it was wonderful being able to be a part of the commentary team. I've had a fair amount of success at that. But I now tend to focus more on podcasting, you know, and certainly giving updates and so on radio, as opposed to going live on television during a match. I have no problem doing, I mean, I've been lucky enough and blessed enough to actually do the hosting leading up to a one-day international, which was just awe-inspiring, you know. So I was the one who said, we're coming to you live from Harare Sports Club in the first of 3 one-day internationals between Zimbabwe and India. And my director would be talking to me, telling me all the various graphics that are up. All right, Dean, here's the thing of the weather. Please mention the weather. And so on and so forth. You know, that was awesome, and I wouldn't mind doing more of that. But actual commentating, I've become, and I'm not afraid to say this either, I've become quite afraid, really, because I'm so scared that already I have enough people who believe that I shouldn't be in the commentary box because of the fact that I can't see and that I've never played the game. So I would hate to stain what has been up to now a blemish-free record. You know, I mean, everybody makes mistakes. Even sighted commentators who've played the game make very big mistakes. But there's a difference. They can get away with that, and I may not necessarily be able to get away with that. So because I've lost so much of my hearing, it's something that I rather stay away from, and I've now found my niche in terms of doing podcasts.
Dean, look, I listen to your podcast all the time, and I would pay to listen to something like that. And I'm sure the viewers are missing out on a whole lot of brilliant commentary coming from your end. And it is sad to hear that, but knowing the type of person that you are, who's always found a way to overcome challenges, I'm sure you're going to find a way around this. And in saying that, ladies and gentlemen, if you've just tuned in, we are towards the tail end of our show tonight, and we've got Dean here. So if you have any questions for Dean, please just pop them in the chat, be it on the Zoom chat or here on the Facebook live chat. Dean, while everyone puts in their questions, what do you have to say, Dean, to people who have dreams and aspirations, but then they just feel like they are impossible?
Look, in order to achieve, you need to believe, and it's a motto and a mantra that I've carried with me for many years: believe and achieve. Now, let me tell you something, God will, this year, it will be my 20th year of trying to do this, and I still haven't achieved what I would have liked to have achieved. And I can tell you now that most sighted people who had set out to do what I wanted to do, and that's to be a journalist, would have achieved a bit more than me in their 20 years. But you know what? That's neither here nor there. Whether that would have been the case or not been the case, we'll never know. So I wouldn't even really want to dwell too much on that. I would want to focus more on trying to inspire people and motivate them to believe in themselves. So sometimes you'll wake up and you'll think that things really aren't, no matter how you try, aren't going your way. And it is true. Sometimes it does happen that way. Sometimes you are just completely, for no particular reason, overlooked. But then there's also, with the bad, there's always the good. With the sad, there's always the happy. With the negative, there's always the positive. And you know, to me, one of the things that you need to be doing is to believe in your own ability. So if you believe in your own ability, you will achieve. And it doesn't always necessarily happen overnight, which I think is a very good thing. So if I do eventually reach the goal that I have set out to do, I will know that I got there through damn hard work, and not because of the fact that anything was handed to me on a platter. I know that I would have had to have worked a lot harder than most people to get there, and I will always count my blessings and be very grateful for that.
Wow, those are very, very wise words there, Dean. And very inspiring words there are. I'm looking here in our Zoom chat, and there is a question here. How can I get a hold of your podcast?
Oh, yeah, that's a wonderful question. So the name of the podcast is Dean at Stumps. It's available on all the major podcast feeds. So, for example, if you have an Apple device, you just go into the built-in Apple Podcast app. You search for Dean at Stumps and you subscribe. But it's also available on the Overcast app, which is a podcast app. Downcast, also available there. Spotify, it's also available on Spotify. Or if you maybe have an app which is called Anchor, and you search for Dean at Stumps on that, you will find, and you can then subscribe to the podcast. So basically, in a nutshell, every single major podcast feed, I guess you can call it, has the Dean at Stumps podcast, and there are some magnificent interviews, really. Not because I did them, but because the people were kind enough to give me some of their time. Michael Holding, David Gower, Dave Houghton, Sean Pollock, Kumar Sangakkara, Graham Hick. The list is pretty endless. I can't even remember all of them now. But if you subscribe to the podcast, you'll see what I mean.
Indeed, Dean. And look, I, for one, can second what Dean has to say. I'm a big fan of his podcast and a big fan of Dean himself, and we'll definitely keep an eye out for that. Dean, we've done a lot of talking, and look, I'm looking over here. Looking over at the questions. We're not going to have enough time to go through all of the questions that have been thrown at us, but I'm sure there could be some that we could pick up offline. But Dean, thank you so much for your time. You are such an inspiration and such a role model. And I really appreciate you taking time out and chatting to us here tonight.
Well, that's very kind of you to say so, Godwill. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to also say thank you. Thank you very much for having me on your show, but also to the many people who have taken time out of their busy day to come and have a chat with me, be it in a restaurant or in the shops, or no matter where we are. Thank you for your time, because you need to understand that without the support of the I don't want to use the word fans, because that sounds very arrogant, but without the support of the cricket lover, I would be nothing and I would be nowhere. So even though I've been privileged enough to go to Bangladesh and to be on various feeds on radio and television, I'd like to thank you, the listener, the viewer, the cricket lover, who's taken time out of your day to come and have a chat with me and have a selfie or whatever the case may be. Because had it not been for you, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. So thank you very much for taking time out of your day as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. Dean Duplessis with us here, Awanda, a cricket guru, the walking cricket encyclopedia, I love to call him, a man who knows his cricket inside out. And, he's come here, he's inspired, he's gone through all the adversity from birth to date, but he's a guy who wakes up and sees the bright shining sun. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Our time has sadly run out, and with Dean, we could chat to him all day and probably into the evening. And just want to remind you all just to stay safe, keep looking after your loved ones, and to keep sanitizing those hands, as COVID is still a reality. Those of you who've not been to our website, visit www.africasportsconsultancy.com. Read about it. There's some really useful tools there for yourself and for some of your loved ones. From my side here, I'd like to thank you and say good night to you. And Dean, good night to you too.
Thank you very much, Godwill. Good night, everybody, and please stay safe.